chat. We are joined live. We're going to New York and we're joined by Commissioner Don Garber of the MLS. Don, it's great to see what a fantastic bookcase behind you, first and foremost, meticulous in its order, which says probably a lot about the league itself. I hope you're safe and well, first and foremost, and you and your team.
Thanks, Jimmy. But the beauty of digital photography, that's actually an art photograph of all those books. It is not an actual bookcase of those books.
Well, you got me there, Don. You really did. Well, listen, I think the first question for me is I was reflecting on this, and you know, you're in your 25th season. You were 2 games, I think, into the season. New teams, record crowds, and a pipeline of new teams coming online, and then the pandemic hits, and then a recession's about to start. So can you just give us the kind of a review of the impact that is having on your sport, a sport which is probably more of a challenger sport in the US?
Well, listen, the impact on us, Jimmy, is no more than any other professional sports league or any other, sports operation. Our league had enormous momentum. We had a lot of energy behind expansion. Nashville had their opening game with 60,000 people there. So I would argue that hardly a challenger. Not too many sports teams in our country attract 60,000 fans to a game. And Miami, owned in part by David Beckham, was about to play their first home game, sold out with all sorts of people on a season ticket waiting list. And then, everything was put on pause. So we, like every other league, I know you had Gary Bettman on earlier, trying to figure out how to manage through this pandemic and ensure we're protecting the safety of our players, our staff, and obviously our fans, but getting back to work as quickly and safely as we can.
Don, you've got a very diverse ownership group, and some of them have got experience in leagues outside of the MLS. What are you telling the owners right now, and what are they telling you?
Well, a lot of it, I'll start, Jimmy, it's more about listening, right? They all have various businesses and lots of different industries beyond just their ownership of sports teams here in North America and around the world. And we're tapping into their expertise and their experience and trying to get an understanding of what impact the coronavirus has had on their various businesses and how will that affect their investment horizon and their ability to manage through both in the short term, the midterm, and the long term. We're fortunate, though, to your point, and you know them well, Jimmy, that we have owners in the Premier League, owners that have teams in Serie A and in Spain, and we're able to tap into the learning that is going on as each of those leagues are getting back to play. 2 of our owners have teams in the Bundesliga, and I'm very close to Christian Seifert, their CEO. So we've been tracking very closely what they've been doing leading up to their launch this weekend and how they're going to manage through that for the months to come. And very importantly, every one of our teams has an owner that has some experience in the entertainment business, in the finance business, in the retail business, sports business, and all of those learnings as they're charting through managing their day-to-day is very, very helpful to me running the league as commissioner, but also to our senior team that is managing medical protocols and managing ticketing issues and sponsorship issues and game operations issues and health and safety issues, et cetera, et cetera.
Don, I'm going to jump forward actually to the Bundesliga, because I know that you mentioned that you're friends with Christian Seifert and they've just obviously played this weekend. What were the lessons that you drew from that experience if you did take it in?
Well, the first thing, Jim, is that, they have such a close relationship with their government, and the Bundesliga is such an important part of German culture. And getting back was not just important to the economics and the viability of their respective clubs, but, to get sort of the passion behind their league and get people excited and united. They were very, very focused early on a plan to get into their local stadiums, to have a terrific medical and testing protocol, and to ensure that they were putting a product on global television that would resonate what was interesting is putting aside production decisions and how they creatively manage their stadium environments, there were some really good games, exciting games, and the players got back quick. They got fit, and the story is, yeah, the Bundesliga is back is one part of it, but an important part of the story was, what happened, and I think that was what we're all waiting for and what we're all anxious to get back.
What are the lessons you take from it in terms of returning to play for the MLS? I know there's some talk about returning to a neutral venue to initially get back and then maybe move back into the stadiums. But could you just give us a little bit more colour on what your plans are in the immediate future for that?
We're very similar to the other North American leagues, Jim, other than the fact that, like baseball has not started yet, and the NFL hasn't started yet, we kind of in the middle. We only played 2 games. The NBA almost completed, the NHL almost completed. So of at least the team sports, we have this enormous challenge in that we just started and had great momentum with that start. So we need to get back to play. Our players want to get on the field. They've got to get their fitness up. They've got to do what they do so well, which is, entertain and create this enormous drama for, our growing fan base. We are looking at a number of different scenarios that include playing in neutral sites, and are developing those plans and have got to finalize what that looks like from a testing perspective. How do we ensure that we're able to do that in an organized way, getting them back to train for a period of time and then getting them back to play. And then, like the other leagues, looking at how the pandemic is developing so that we can get back into playing in our stadiums. We still have the rest of the year to be able to get in as much of our schedule as possible. Our hope early on was to play a full 34 game season. That is looking like it will be more challenging, though we're still focused on getting in as much of it as possible, deliver for our national broadcast partners and sponsors, but also deliver for our local sponsors and media partners, but most importantly, delivering for our fans.
Let's talk about fans, because it was clear when you did see the Bundesliga games, it was very, very different experience, no matter how good it was on the pitch. What are you doing to engage fans, and how do you plan to engage fans when you do return to play?
Well, let me start first with what we're doing during this hiatus period. Lots of social media connections, lots of entertainment programming. MLS has a very, very active digital operation, and we've got these great shows that we're putting on the air on MLSsoccer.com and on all of our social channels on Instagram and Twitter, but also with some of our media partners to just continue to engage, to get our players profile, to show what they're doing with supporting healthcare heroes, to show what they're doing with esports. We just completed a great program on Fox. We had an EMLS tournament. I thought it was really fun and entertaining, won by Atlanta United, by the way. And we had, weeks of games going on. We have rivalry week games that are going on with our broadcast partners and engaging and elevating that on social media. But the best thing I could say is we've got this very committed, passionate group of supporters that want to see what our players are doing. Not the toilet bowl challenge kind of thing that you've seen early on. I think those things have done their part, but it really now is more about how could we communicate how they're training, what are they doing at home in preparing for individual workouts, which just opened up about 2 weeks ago in many of our markets. What are they thinking about as they're connecting to their families? And I heard the great interview just prior. This is an unusual, unprecedented period of time for everyone in our business. And the fact that our athletes are now spending more time at home and spending time with their families is something I think our fans care about, but they also are really thinking about connecting with what they're doing to prepare to get back on the field.
It's certainly true that there's definitely been a greater connection in some ways between players and fans, whilst players are at home and fans are at home, which is great for the sport. What about when the teams play in empty stadiums? Have you any ideas on how you might use technology or in different types of engagement to make sure the fans are involved?
There's been a lot of talk about that, Jimmy, and there's nothing like these great walls of supporters like we have in every one of our stadiums, and certainly the yellow wall in Dortmund was something that was talked about, and I've seen images of virtual fans and digital fans that have been done in watch parties. I thought NASCAR did a great job with a Zoom watch party, and I think you'll expect that when we get back to play, we'll do similar things. But I don't think you could artificially replicate the environment in a stadium when you're playing without fans. I think we've got to focus in on the game on the field and getting our players back to being profiled for doing what they do so well. And then really, as I know we're going to be thinking hard about how do we elevate some of the thinking or accelerate some of the thinking that we've had with new technologies so that we could experiment with some of those things as we produce games in a neutral site or do them in our home stadium. Soccer, I've always believed, was behind the curve as it relates to utilizing technology in our broadcast. We're not doing enough with audio. We're not doing enough with virtual. We're not doing enough with ways that we can create more camera angles and personalized ways of focusing in on players. We're not doing enough with data in our broadcasts. And I think that these games give us an opportunity when we do get back to experiment a bit and maybe push the governing bodies, whether that's IFAB, which, as you know, is the group that sort of creates the rules of the game, or whether it's FIFA, whether it's our own broadcast partners. And those are some of the things we're focused on, and I'm pretty excited about. When we do get back, you'll see some creative and not unprecedented, but innovative technologies in those broadcasts without fans.
I mean, we've been doing a number of Zoom calls with the broadcast community, the commercial community, the CEOs, and innovation is definitely coming out. I wanted to focus on sponsors and broadcasters, if I may, just for a couple of minutes, Don, because this seems to be one of the biggest challenges that franchises and leagues face, is how do they deliver these contractual rights to these partners? What's your approach to that, and how is it going? Could you give us a kind of review of that?
It starts with, we've got a very vibrant commercial business, and we're proud of the leadership that we've had in driving the commercial value of soccer and football around the world through our marketing company, Soccer United Marketing. And as you know, not only does some manage the commercial operations for MLS, but also for U.S. Soccer and for the Mexican Federation and also for CONCACAF. So we've got this unique challenge, but opportunity of not only dealing with our own national business, our global business, our 2016 business, but also other properties here and around the world. And we're working hard to continue to communicate with them to ensure that they understand in a very transparent way what we're doing to get back to play. How can we deal with delivering their intellectual property rights through some unique programming, advertising and sponsoring some of the MLS rivalry games that are done, obviously with games in the past. How do we and connect them to some of the plans we have with returning play, either virtually in a neutral site or through when we do get back into our stadiums, and how can we create some unique marketing programs? And I'm excited about some of those things that we've done with Heineken and those things that we've done with Coca-Cola and with AT&T and with Target. And we're going to continue to engage with them closely. And that's on the broad basis. On the local level, clearly our teams are working closely with their sponsors and local media partners to talk to them about what's going on in the short term, the medium term, and then ultimately when we get back. And it's hard to imagine that's long term, but it really is the balance of 2020 and 2021.
Okay, good. We've got a couple of audience questions. The first one was from Nadia. Fleany, I think it was, from CBC Sports in Canada. But you don't need to answer this because her question is, on your actual bookshelf behind you, do you have a book recommendation? So we can put that one to one side because we know now that it's not a bookcase. But we're going to jump to Jim Godley, who says, what do you see as the women's game's biggest challenge in terms of partnering with MLS franchises? So what's the biggest challenge for the women's game?
Listen, I think I'll take it in the broad sense. The entire industry, sports industry overall, and certainly the soccer football industry has great challenges moving forward. We've got to understand what the world looks like in 21 and beyond. How do we ensure that we can manage our businesses with potentially limited attendance, and what impact will that have on our revenues? And that's no different for the men's game than it is for the women's game. I think, unfortunately, the women's game had great momentum, and I think there were lots of developments, positive developments in Europe and at the federation and confederation level. And I think we got to all hope as an industry that we could continue to put energy behind the women's game. The NWSL, as you've probably heard, is working hard to continue to expand their league, get owners to come in and invest as they've done in other sports, and many MLS owners have been driving a lot of activity in that front, and we'll continue to, as a league, provide what support we can, whether that be through our owners, like in Orlando and Portland and Salt Lake and other cities, Houston, or whether it's perhaps more engagement with us as a league office or with us as a marketing entity. So we'll continue those discussions. I hope, like all of us, that they can get back and get back quickly.
Big questions ahead, Don. There's lots about to change in the world of sport. What do you think the biggest changes will be in the future to the way in which we consume, play, structure sport?
Well, I'll start on the actual operational side, and as you can imagine, and I didn't see Gary's interview, but I'm sure he talked about it as well. We've got to change the way we're going about operating our games, because I don't think that even when we do get back to full stadiums, you're going to start seeing a variety of different operational changes that kind of will replicate how we adjusted to a new normal with travel, airline travel. You'll see more sanitation activities. You'll see ways that we can ensure that we're having our players and all of our stadium workers going through medical and testing protocols to ensure their safety and to ensure their health. But I do believe that at some point we will get back to having fans in our stadiums, albeit through different operational safety and security procedures. And then I think there'll be all sorts of very, exciting changes as it relates to consumption. We now are living in a world where we're able to work more remotely, and I think that perhaps could change the way league offices and our clubs are operating, and that I think will have a positive cost benefit to professional sports teams and leagues. And I think you're going to see all sorts of unique and creative engagement in terms of how it is that we're going to be communicating with our fans, and how it is that we'll be managing our relationship with media partners, both on the journalism perspective, but also on the broadcast perspective. And I'm actually pretty excited about that. We're spending a lot of time thinking about that. I am encouraged by this enormous level of just passion and interest that the business community and the consumer community has for sports getting back. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to tap into all that energy and be able to deliver on everybody's hopes and the dreams that they have for sports to come back in ways like they could remember. And I'm convinced that it will.
Well, Don, we're out of time there. I'd like to say, we could go on much, much longer, and it would be great to see you in person at some time in the future. I really look forward to that. But we have to call it a day there. Thank you so much for your time, and best wishes to everyone at the MLS.
Thanks very much, and to you and your company.